Hello and welcome to scalewarmachines. One often overlooked area when it comes to modelling and hobbies in general is lighting. It can be vitally important, not only to save your eyesight, but also potentially to show your models at their best. We were recently sent a sample light that modellers may find useful by BenQ, and we'll be taking a look at that later on. But I thought it would be a good idea to talk more generally about lighting, look at what I do, and then give you a verdict on the BenQ lamp. So what are the considerations for a modeller when it comes to lighting? Well, firstly it's eye strain. As you get older you appreciate a well-lit workpiece and workbench more and more. The greater the light, the more detail you see. But you don't want the light to be too bright, as that can be fatiguing, so some way to control the light levels is a good idea. Also, if a light is overly bright, it will create harsh shadows. Generally you want an even, soft light that doesn't create too many shadows. The only exception is for figure painters, who may sometimes want a very harsh light to locate the shadows on a bust or figurine. If you get an even light, it should reduce eye strain and help you work for a long period without getting fatigue in your peepers. The next matter to consider is colour temperature. My own background is in broadcast TV and film, and I could drone on about colour temperature and lighting for ages, but I'm going to keep it super simple. Colour temperature can make a difference to how you see colour, how accurate it is, and the effect it has on your models. It's measured in units called Kelvin and uses the Kelvin temperature scale. At one end of the spectrum you have warm light. This is at the lower end and is orangey in nature, like the sodium type of lighting you might get in some older street lights. At the higher end you have daylight, and beyond that intense light and even UV. So candles will be around 1,500 Kelvin, while daylight is typically between 5,500 and 6,500 Kelvin. As you can imagine, the colour temperature of the light you use can have a serious effect on colour. This is best shown on screen, but your eyes will detect it and see it the same way, although they will adjust the more used to it they get. Let me show you what I mean. Here is a model under 3 different lighting conditions and 3 different colour temperatures. You can see the settings on the screen. The colour temperature you use will depend on your tastes and situation. You may even be working in a room with mixed lighting, which can be even more confusing. That's where warmer light is falling on a model from, say, a central ceiling light, and cooler blue light is shining onto the model from a daylight adjusted task lamp or even a window. In other words, there are infinite possibilities and permutations depending on the modeler and the environment. The best way to be certain is to use one type of light, and a bit like in the movies, if you black out the room and start from there, you should get a consistent colour temperature from consistent light sources. So what have I personally done? I have always used daylight bulbs. In this case these bulbs are made by ProLight, which you can get on Amazon and from other sources. They come with screw fittings. Before I was on YouTube, I used these bulbs with 2 IKEA desk lamps arranged on my workspace. I found them to give a pleasing colour temperature and accurate colour rendition. But how can you control the brightness and evenness of these sorts of basic lights? Well, physics is your friend here. It dictates that the further away the source is from a subject, the less illuminated it will be. If you need more light, move the light closer. If the light's too bright, move it away. You could also use something like an ND gel, which is common in filmmaking, acting like a pair of sunglasses, dimming down the light levels. ND stands for neutral density and is available in various strengths. When it comes to creating a soft, diffused light, you can do that too using something called diffusion paper. Again, it can be placed over the light and will soften and also make it slightly less bright as well. It's best to get proper diffusion paper, as it will resist heat and not catch fire. That is exactly how I modelled for many years, with IKEA lamps, a few cheap accessories, and the diffusion paper was either clipped or taped to the lights. Crocodile clamps are great for this task. Another common scenario for modellers where lighting is important is for photographs. Many modellers like to see their models photographed at their best, and this can be useful for magazines or websites, or just as a personal record. Here again, there are really detailed videos out there explaining how to photograph models, but many of the same considerations apply. You want colours to look accurate, and you really want to eliminate shadows using diffused light. This is a subject that warrants a whole video series in itself, but I'll give you a basic introduction and tell you what I did first and how it has changed. The initial thing to consider is not light, but backdrop. The best is a neutral white background, and you have some options here, the simplest being rolls of paper or plastic backdrops. Tamiya and others also make light booths or cocoons for your photography, which vary tremendously in price. At the high end, you have prosumer items made by the likes of Lasterlight. There are, of course, a multitude of potential backdrops in all sorts of shades and patterns, which you can get from photographic suppliers or eBay. Again, colour temperature is important, and I've always used exactly the same daylight bulbs for my photography. I also used the same IKEA lamps, and I constructed a simple rig with those and some colour-matched tube lights to illuminate the backdrop. Another key element is the configuration of the white balance of your digital camera, as that is another variable which can change or upset everything. This setting dictates how your camera sees colours, and it too mimics what we saw with the Kelvin scale. Some cameras will allow you to manually set the colour temperature. Basically, you want it to match your bulb's Kelvin setting. There is, however, another super useful accessory that will help you if you have any kind of photo processing software. This is a Y-Bal card. These simple grey cards are coloured in a neutral tone, which creates a baseline for correcting colour temperature or white balance. Just place it in shot, and using the colour picker or white balance tool in something like Photoshop, you can easily reset the colour balance of the photo in post-production. Again, this is a quick summary of what it does, and some nerds will comment, but that's how it works, and that's what I do. If you want to find out more, do more detailed research. Like in the movies, the most common lighting setup is a 3-point lighting arrangement. This uses one more powerful light, called a key light, a fill light, which serves to eliminate shadows, and a backlight, which lights from the rear and can sometimes create desirable effects. You can of course use top light instead of a backlight, or even just a 2-point lighting system, or as you'll see, only one key light. The photo light booths or cubes also use a similar system of multiple light sources. Watch some videos on product photography if you want to know more. All will depend on the effect you want to achieve, but generally you want an even light illuminating the subject and an absence of shadows. A post-production software is also extremely helpful, not just in tweaking things like colour temperature or colour balance, but also in undertaking all sorts of improvements and corrections, like removing dust or imperfections that come through on the photos or the sensor of the camera. I've seen on Pinterest that some modelers are using the cheap and readily available LED light strips to create a sort of Wembley arch structure over their desk. This seems like a good idea to get a sort of hemisphere of light over your work area. I guess they use flexible rod or tent poles to get the arch, but as I've never done this, I can't say if it's any good. If you've done this, then let us know in the comments. There is one other consideration that may apply to some modelers, but only those on YouTube or who make videos. If that's not you, then disregard this. When it comes to videos, as I like more of an area light over the workbench, I went for some continuous photography lamps. These two are daylight balanced, which is what I like. They were cheap and you can get them via eBay. They use 4 helix spiral bulbs each, and you have a degree of control as you can turn off one bank of 2 bulbs per lamp. They come with what's called a softbox, which diffuses or softens the light source, and it dims the light source slightly as well. This performs the same function as the diffusion paper we saw earlier. They often ship in a kit with stands, and you could always fix them over your workbench if you so choose. My top tip is to get some lights like this, or at least some pro light bulbs for your workspace. As I got more into video and photography, I naturally went completely overboard and snapped up a rail and pantograph system a couple of years ago. Like you see in photography or TV studios, a rail system and pantographs allows you to move the light virtually anywhere, and there are no trailing wires or stands to get in your way. This is the single best thing I have ever bought, and as I have grand plans for the workshop, I need to be able to set lights in different locations. It's complete and utter overkill, but I thought you might be interested to see the setup. The biggest name is Bowens, and a new system like this is horrendously expensive and reserved for pros. Most modelers will think I am utterly mad even suggesting such a thing, but actually they're quite cheap on eBay when a professional photographer decides to call it a day and sell their studio equipment. I got a massive setup at a tiny fraction of the cost thanks to eBay. So hear me out. A modeler could initially opt for a single Bowens rail and some mounting plates to put the track over your work area. I recently got a 3-meter Bowens rail on eBay for 20 quid. You will need a couple of rail carriages with the spigot to mount the light. These run along the rail using tiny wheels and bearings. You can then pick up a couple of second-hand pantographs on eBay when you see them. These can be anywhere from £50 to £100 or more. I have some of the shorter, light lift ones, and they're very clever. They use a spring to stay at the height you choose. I've stopped using the IKEA lamp setup, and now I use a 2-point or even 3-point lighting setup on a pantograph for photos. So if you are a sensible or level-headed person, please feel free to laugh at the extremes I have taken this to. Whilst we're talking about extremes of behaviour and what we're prepared to pay in pursuit of our beloved hobby, there are other options, including higher-end task lights. For many, you can happily model illuminated by cheapo IKEA lights without shelling out a fortune. But if you do have some money burning a hole in your back pocket, you could try a higher-end offering like this swanky item from BenQ. One of the nice things about having this channel is I'm really very fortunate to get samples or products to review. If you haven't realised already, this sort of marketing is prevalent on YouTube, as it gives brands plenty of coverage for quite minimal outlay, just the cost of sending out some product. In the interests of transparency, I'd never agree to anything that doesn't give me complete editorial control, and BenQ were kind enough to accept that and were happy for me to say whatever I wanted to say about it, unconditionally. You're all old enough and wise enough to know that this kind of marketing only works if people tell it like it is, and the electronic word-of-mouth recommendation is reliable. So I'll start by saying this is very expensive as a modelling light. It retails at about the cost of a decent compressor, so many modelers may just find this cost prohibitive. But here's what I think. Setting cost concerns aside, this is unquestionably a lovely and quality item. The build is great and it's nicely finished with decent spec components. The method of turning it on and off is slightly unusual, as you have to touch the BenQ's ring to get it going. You then touch its polished knob to control other variables and functions. If you tap the knob, you can change the colour temperature from a daylight setting to a warmer, more orangey colour temperature, similar to sodium lighting. If you twiddle and twist the BenQ's dial just right, it controls the dimmer function and gives you a pleasing range of output from this easygoing fainter setting to something brighter, as you can see. What is unquestionably the lamp's strong point is its wang-like banana shape, which projects a gentle fan-shaped light pattern over your workbench. It distributes light evenly and effectively over your workpiece. This is further enhanced by what I think is the best feature, the angle arm, which at one end sits in a hefty circular base, and at the other end has an articulated ball mount, allowing you to move the light into all sorts of positions and angles around your model. This is especially useful for figure painters, allowing you to mimic things like sunlight, showing where your shadows will fall on a model figurine, and allowing you to paint according to a real or imagined key light. It also would allow you to light and concentrate on one part of a model, offering a bright, localized light which is soft-edged and would certainly reduce eye strain over long periods. There are no unwanted shadows, so that shows it's well diffused. Will it light an entire workbench? No, but it will illuminate your workpiece very well and allow you to work in a helpful and less fatiguing way. The accuracy of colour rendering will depend on personal tastes and the colour temperature you like to work at, or which you think best serves your kind of modelling. The range of this lamp is fairly typical and should offer something for everyone. Choose a setting that works for you. It does have some other modes, like an auto dimming function for reading, and there's also an automatic mode for screens. And this is probably how I'll end up using this, in my office for lighting my screen and keyboard area when editing at the computer. I continue to prefer an area light, using the diffused studio lighting setup you saw, and so where this is best suited for me is definitely in the office. BenQ have sent this lamp to other YouTubers, including modelers, who are going to use this for their modelling spaces, so I suggest you watch their reviews and see how the lamp works for modelers longer term. In the office, it's working out absolutely great for me and reduces fatigue when using the computer. The downsides for me were the time it took to work out the user interface. It can be quite confusing switching between color temperature and dimming functions using the BenQ knob. Also, I was stumped by the automatic modes for a while, but the auto dimming screen mode, the green one, eventually appeared when the light sensed a screen nearby. Very clever. On the modelling bench, I could only ever get the orange or reading mode to light up. If you've got the money and just need a work lamp for your hobby, for making and painting your models, without any of the other scenarios I mentioned like photography or video, then this is a versatile and quality piece of kit. It's nice to look at and use, but it certainly works as a modelling light, and that's the key point. It works well if your budget extends to it. And it's also pleasing to have a nicely designed item on your workbench. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this journey into light for modelers. It's just an introduction. It's a vast and complex subject area, and this is just intended as a starter course. But it's a video I've wanted to make for a long time, and when I started to investigate it a few years ago, I didn't really know where to start, so I wanted to share what I've learned. Hopefully this will help you. If it did, do give scalewarmachines a thumbs up, or why not consider subscribing to our channel. So until the next time, bye.
Subscribe for our latest videos.